This is Witchcraft Beyond the Basics, week number 5. I hope everybody had a good week, and I'm assuming everybody completed their spell this week. If not, you'll have to wait till the following waxing moon to do your attraction spell. Let's start out today by focusing on the emotional aspect of our spellcasting. Emotions are very powerful forces. When you want to change, improve, or eliminate something, emotion is crucial to your success. In spellcasting, you may be wanting to bring something new in or getting rid of something already existing in your life or transforming or changing something into something else. Essentially, you're either seeking something new, wanting something removed, or something changed. A common mistake that people make is getting confused about cause and effect. Cause and effect is the fundamental principle of all the Hermetic laws, with everything that exists being the result of a cause. To work magic, it's essential to remember that every effect in our lives has a cause. And there is no vacuum. Nature abhors a vacuum. All vacuums are immediately filled. You can't do something without triggering some sort of reaction. And this is similar to what I call the law of resonance. For instance, when you fall in love with someone, they aren't making you love them by sending love to you. Instead, when you are both in love, you are responding to each other's love. They are responding to your love, you're responding to their love, and together you are experiencing a resonance. Similarly, when people talk about things like attack magic and hexing, they often think that someone is sending negative energy directly to harm them. Even the hexers might believe that they are actually doing this, but that's not how it works. You can't send negative energy to attack someone directly. Instead, the hexer is suggesting something subliminally through telepathic means that something is happening, and the person then hexes themselves. Think of it this way. If someone is hypnotizing you, like a stage hypnotist, they're not sending you a thought that says, act like a chicken. They're suggesting that you act like a chicken, and then you decide to do it because your mind is being so suggestible. Now imagine someone who's very suggestible on an ocean liner feeling fine, but that someone comes up to them and says, you look sick, are you okay? You look like you're getting seasick. The person might initially say, no, I'm okay. But if the other person is persistent and saying, no, you look pretty sick, you should lie down, the suggestible person might start feeling sick, even though they were fine before. In contrast, someone who's been at sea many times, maybe they're in the Navy, or maybe they're a captain themselves or a sailor. If someone tried the same thing on them, saying, you look really sick, you look like you're getting seasick, the sailor might laugh and say, you're crazy, I don't get seasick. Or they might get annoyed and respond, I never get seasick, I'm fine, go away. The difference is that the sailor isn't suggestible in that way. The suggestible person allowed their mind to resonate with the emotional and mental energy of the person suggesting that they were seasick. The sailor did not. A hex works similarly. If someone telepathically suggests to another person that they don't feel good, are accident-prone, unlucky, or even are dying, if the hexer's will is strong enough to burrow into the deep mind of the victim may start to experience those things themselves. When people talk about attack magic, it's not really that somebody is psychically attacking you with something like a lightning bolt or a fire bolt. What they're doing is suggesting something to your deep mind, and then you start creating that reality for yourself. And this same principle applies to positive magic that we do for ourselves as well. If you want to change or attract something, you need to examine your current emotional energy and treat it as the cause. For example, a common situation is somebody who has a lot of credit card debt, and then they feel guilty about the credit card debt. Oftentimes they think that the debt itself is what caused the guilt, but in reality, the guilt is manifesting itself as the credit card debt. So they need to view their thoughts as the emotional manifestation of the experience and change the emotion in order to create a new result. You don't wait for the result to make you happy. You create the happy emotion first and then perform your spell. Avoid doing spell work while you're feeling desperate and unhappy. That's why I provide those waning moon flips to help you to change your emotional energy right away. That's a good banishing. You take whatever it is that you're experiencing and then you flip it. That's a great thing to do during the waning moon. It puts you in a position of power to start to change your circumstances. But if you just go in and do a spell about whatever it is that's causing the emotional upset, while you're in that state of emotional upset, you might actually dig your heels into the problem even farther. The fastest way to clean up and rebalance your emotional energy is through gratitude. Before, during, and after every spell, focus on gratitude as quickly as possible, as if the desired outcome has already happened. What would you feel if all your debts were paid? Gratitude. So focus on the gratitude, and then you are in a powerful emotional posture to do a spell to get those debts paid. What would you feel if all of a sudden the pain in your body was gone? Gratitude. So start by feeling that gratitude, and then go for the healing spell. Regardless of whether it's a waning moon spell or a waxing moon spell, gratitude is your tool for the fastest results. In your homework packet for this week, I've included a meditation on gratitude. Additionally, in your homework assignment, I've given you some writing homework, and that is to start a gratitude journal or a section on gratitude in your main Book of Shadows. Each day, write down things for which you are grateful. Really make time for this daily. Don't just think about it. Write it down. Remember how writing is a powerful act. Throughout history, writing has been a part of magic and spellcrafting. Whether it's runes or hieroglyphics, when you write something down, it becomes real. So create a list of the things that you're grateful for. These can be big things or small things or anything in between. For example, you might write, I'm grateful for air. I'm grateful for food. I'm grateful for my home. I'm grateful for my green jumper. Whatever it is that you love, whatever it is that you're thankful for. Your goal is to have at least 100 items within 1 week, but aim for more if possible. Try going for 200 or 300 items. Make sure that you do carve out time for this very important exercise. You've got to start with the emotion that you want to exist as a result of your spell once it's manifest. Flip your cause and effect. Don't wait for the manifestation to feel grateful, happy, prosperous, healthy, or whatever. Feel those emotions first. Conjure those emotions. That's how you conjure. Conjure those emotions that you know will exist once your spell has manifest, and then your spell will manifest. Feel the emotions first, even if you have to fake it. If you can't feel the emotions for what you're working on, at least find gratitude. Through gratitude, all those other emotions will start to become available. Remember that there's only 2 classes of emotions, relaxed and tense. Tense emotions are not conducive to successful and effective magic. Relaxed emotions are. Gratitude gives you a sense of relaxation, making all the other positive emotions more accessible. You can't be tense and relaxed at the same time any more than you can inhale and exhale at the same time. In your spell work, you'll notice that your sphere of influence and gratitude are closely linked. Learning how to find something to be grateful for everywhere, anywhere, is a very powerful tool for expanding that sphere of influence. When you think in terms of gratitude, your deep mind recognizes your power and your success. It doesn't argue or rationalize, it just accepts it. By showing your deep mind your gratitude, it sees you as powerful, and it reduces the barriers and rapidly starts to increase your sphere of influence naturally. In this week's homework, you will also have 2 files, one called Basic Spell Enhancements, and the other one is called Houses, Planets, and Elements. So let's start by discussing the one called Houses, Planets, and Elements. You'll notice that every house in the zodiac is ruled by an astrological sign, and each astrological sign is ruled by a planet. In this class, we'll focus on the 7 classical planets of old, which are the core of the Western magical tradition. We are not dealing with Neptune, Uranus, or Pluto in this class. These 7 planets correspond to the days of the week. Saturn rules both Capricorn and Aquarius, Venus rules both Taurus and Libra, and Mercury rules both Virgo and Gemini. When you look at the houses, you'll see that the ruling element of the sign is also important. For example, Mars rules both Scorpio and Aries. Mars is a fire element for Aries in the 1st house, but a water element for Scorpio in the 8th house. Both have martial energies, but they manifest differently. One is fire, and the other as water. For this week's assignment, find a spell related to a goal that is high on your desire scale and somewhat within your sphere of influence, and determine which house it belongs to. You don't have to perform the spell right away, but if it's an attracting spell, you can start preparing to do it for the next waxing moon. And you can also create a waning moon version that you can do as the moon starts to wane. The first house, Mars, is the ruling planet. You can refer back to the qualities of Mars from the second class where we discussed planetary correspondences. So you can look at Mars in its fiery nature as the first house, which relates to appearance, personality, temperament, general disposition. Mars brings its fiery aspects to this house, and this can include traits like temper tantrums and bullying as well. Think about where these traits fit in the first house and the element of fire. The sex drive is in the first house, very fiery sex drive, burning hot and then dying out quickly. In contrast, Mars in the 8th house associated with water has a much deeper and more emotional sex drive, as water rules the emotions. So you can refer to your elemental correspondences sheet for more details. We also covered elements in the basic Witch's Primer, so you may want to review those as well. The houses can serve as an organizational tool, like a file cabinet. The 8th house is another Mars house, and it deals with themes like other people's money, inheritances, sexuality, hidden things, occultism, surgery. Mars's cutting nature, represented by the knife, penetrates below the surface for surgeries. The 8th house also relates to death, regeneration, and reincarnation. You want to try to take some time to contemplate and understand all the concepts that we're talking about with the houses, the planets, and the elements. They require a lot of reflection and study. You need to think about where your desire fits in, which house, which planet, and which elements are involved. We often mention Jupiter and the Sun as money planets, but if you consider it, Venus could actually sometimes be even better with money. Venus is green. It's associated with Taurus in the 2nd house, which is the house of money. Jupiter is the planet of expansion, learning, education, aspirations. So if you wanted to grow your money, Jupiter would be great. The 10th house, Capricorn, and Saturn are important when dealing with money related to hard work, career, and ambitions. For actual liquid financial assets, cash flow, etc., the focus would be on the 2nd house. This is why many money spells are misplaced. For cash flow, you would want the 2nd house, which is Venus and Earth. Most people don't link money with Venus. However, the type of money also matters. For fixed assets, other people's money, and inheritances, you're dealing with the 8th house associated with Scorpio, Mars, and water. The planets are much more complex than we often realize, which is why studying these houses is very helpful. Venus and Earth relate not just to money and assets, but also to luxury. If you're looking for money to live a more luxurious life, the 2nd house would be your focus. It could also relate to vanity, not necessarily in a bad way. It could also involve beauty products and beauty regimes, as well as luxury items. 3rd house is associated with Mercury as it exists in an air sign, because the 3rd house represents Gemini. So it's Mercury and air. Mercury represents mentality, quick transportation, making car spells very effective here. It also pertains to basic education, like reading, writing, and arithmetic, as well as letter writing and correspondences. Additionally, it deals with siblings and neighbors. So if you're trying to mend fences with a troublesome neighbor, the combination of Mercury and air can thus be very effective. The 4th house is associated with the moon and Cancer, symbolizing home, family, parents, especially the mother, motherhood, fertility, the divine feminine, feminine cycles. Think of Cancer like a crab representing anything enclosed and protected, such as a womb or a home. It's also a place for the occult, especially related to emotions and lunar magic. We use the phases of the moon in all of our magic, as it focuses the rays of all the other planets, including the sun, onto the earth. The moon, while not technically a planet, it's called a luminary. It's the closest celestial body to the earth, making it the most accessible for focusing planetary powers. The 5th house, ruled by the sun, is success and love affairs, courtship, children, performing arts, creativity, self-expression, and self-image. the 5th house is very frequently a house of gambling. So for fun gambling where you're just out for the night and having a good time, but also if somebody's got an addiction to gambling, then the 5th house also can rule that. The 5th house also symbolizes theatricality and success. Your 6th house is the house of Mercury again, but this time it's the Earth of Mercury, which focuses more on medicine and healing the body. The caduceus is a symbol of the 6th house. It can also involve things like vitamins and body care and health routines, yoga practices, hygiene. The 6th house is a place of service. Think of how doctors who follow their Hippocratic oath serve by doing no harm and helping others. And this is also why small pets and animals often fall under this house, as they require our care and service. Children are typically found in the 5th house, but they can also appear in the 6th house for their care needs, the 4th house for mothering, and the 10th house for fathering. It really depends on the perspective and approach that you are using for any particular spell. There's no one-size-fits-all solution for almost anything. This is just the normal complexity of life. The 7th house is associated with Venus in her air element, the air of Venus, and represents Venus's intellectual aspect. Venus governs love and the mind, which is why marriages are viewed as a contract involving both love and intellect. Traditionally, the 7th house encompasses partnerships and marriages, as well as public disputes and litigations. Any intellectual conflicts and relationships will appear here. For banishing purposes, you can always identify the negative aspects of any house and use the planet and the element of that house for your banishing spell. Venus often in the 7th house is financial as well, but balancing money, accounting, and things like that. We've already discussed the 8th house, which is Mars in its water aspect in Scorpio, but this house does naturally govern inheritances and other people's money, loans, financial control. If you're pursuing a career in money management, that would be the 8th house because it's other people's money. 8th house relates as well to surgery, death, reincarnation, cycles, deep commitments, oaths, pacts, joint funds. Occult matters are very prominent here. Additionally, it involves taboos and secrecy, whether good or bad. The 9th house, which is a Jupiter house, is Jupiter in fire. This represents total expansion. Anything you want more of that you already have. Jupiter in fire is your planet. The 9th house is also good for world travel, studying other cultures. It's a great place for studying foreign languages because it relates to higher education. Also, languages would be under the auspices of Mercury. Studying multiple languages, 3rd house is extremely beneficial. And the 9th house, if there's a need for studying languages because of travel or moving to another country or something like that. Again, many different approaches. Jupiter is also the planet of good fortune. Religion, law as a profession, legal matters, including lawsuits, are also associated with the 9th house. You could also see that from a 7th house perspective with Libra balancing justice, depending on the circumstance. Jupiter is the planet of good fortune, which is why it's linked with games of chance. Not that I'm ever advocating gambling other than for fun, but traditionally Jupiter would be associated with general good fortune and expansion. However, if you are on a losing streak, Jupiter is not the place to go for help because it's going to expand on what's already there. Instead, you would perhaps turn to the Sun, the 5th house, or the 10th house is where you would go to pay back those gambling debts and get into Debtors Anonymous. Speaking of the 10th house, it's related to your career and social status, and this house is ruled by Saturn. Real estate works well here. Father issues can sometimes relate to IRS problems because the father is ruled by the 10th house. If you're having trouble with the IRS, you may need to address your relationship with your father. The 10th house also covers responsibilities, debts, repayments, ambitions, long-term goals, and career-related life goals. The IRS is associated with the 10th house. The 11th house is associated with Saturn also. Aquarius represents the air aspect of Saturn. This is where scientific breakthroughs and unusual phenomena occur. The 11th house is also friendlier, governing friendships, acquaintances, fraternities, sororities, and even stepchildren. Anything unusual or unique falls under this house. Humanitarianism, astrology as a science, and magical knowledge are linked to the 11th house. This house emphasizes the technical, scientific, and intellectual aspects of magic rather than the mystical or emotional energies. If you aim to expand your magical knowledge, Saturn is beneficial in its air perspective in the 11th house. And then finally, we have the 12th house, which often gets a bad rap. People think it's only about prisons and hospitals, and while it does rule those things, it's definitely not all that's there. The 12th house is the culmination of the entire zodiac, and it's all about mysticism and mystery, often considered the collective unconscious mind as described by Jung, where all the archetypes live in potential. Psychic development, mediumship, channeling, dream interpretation, anything related to hospitals, institutions, prisons. The 12th house is ruled by Jupiter and water, representing expansion into the unconscious and the deeper parts of your emotional nature that exists below the surface. It's also where secrets can come to light. Sometimes people don't realize they have certain assets until they explore Jupiter and their water element, uncovering untapped potential and secret wealth. So I know this is a lot to think about, and we haven't even scratched the surface of the rest of this lesson yet. It's not something that you'll necessarily grasp overnight if you're not familiar with astrology. It requires study and contemplation. Just ask yourself which house your goal fits into and why, and that's going to help you through the laws of correspondence to understand how to approach your spell better. Let's talk about spell enhancements. Enhancements bring more focus and power. Enhancements are based on the element you're using. For instance, if you have an earth spell, you might use a powder or a salt, or gem magic, or poppets, or effigies. For these spells, you could use modeling clay. You could use fabric to make little dolls. You could model coins if you wanted to attract wealth, or you could model a fungus if you're trying to get rid of something in your plants, maybe. Effigies are versatile for any purposes, whether you want to attract, change, or repel something. You can also do planting spells, like placing a coin at the bottom of a pot, adding potting soil and seeds, and letting it grow. This technique can symbolize growing your finances and can be adapted for other purposes. For fire spells, candle spells are very common. You could inscribe runes on the candles to create or banish something. Altars might have multiple candles arranged in a circle or in a star. If you were making a magical powder, you could use the same ingredients in your fire magic to sprinkle into a fire bowl. If you're dealing with a large fire, please do that outside in a well-ventilated area so that you don't have a bunch of smoke in your home. Candles are really great for fire magic. If you have a fire bowl or cauldron, you can burn herbs or other items in it. If you're stoking a small fire and burning something, it's really a fire spell. An indoor fire that's fairly safe is using equal parts of Epsom salts and rubbing alcohol in a cast iron cauldron on some sort of fireproof surface. Remember, fire safety is your responsibility. If you have any question, do your fire magic outside in a barbecue or something. Water magic involves working with washes, waters, and infusions, like traditional witches' brews and libations. It includes activities such as pouring water into a river, a lake, or an ocean, as long as it's safe for the environment. You can also perform magic by safely entering in the ocean or other natural bodies of water. Even bathing in your bathtub is a form of water magic. Additionally, you can use your chalice or cup as a magical tool prominently displayed on your altar. For fire magic, you could use your athame as a prominent tool on your altar. Air magic involves using incenses, essential oils, perfumed oils, and spray perfumes for their fragrances. Scented water leans towards water. However, if you are focusing mostly on the fragrance, then it's more of an air tool. If you're dabbing essential oils to create fragrance, that also falls under air magic because it's all about the scent. Breath magic focuses on breathing in or out particular qualities or breathing onto an object to bless it. Smoke, smudging, and scattering things to the four winds are also part of air magic. Basic wand and censer or thurible magic, where you would use your thurible to create smoke, are also included as air magic. For instance, For powders, you can simply sprinkle a powder around to imbue the energy of your spell in a particular area. You could sprinkle the powder wherever you want the spell to manifest, like in your mailbox or on your threshold. Powders are as simple as powdered herbs. You can take the herbs that correspond to your goal and you can powder them up. You can start with a mortar and pestle for powdering dried herbs. For powdering woods, barks, or roots, you could use a mill or find them pre-powdered. You could use a coffee grinder dedicated only to the purpose of herb magic. When powdering herbs, use dried herbs unless you plan to use the powder immediately, as fresh herbs will get moldy. For long-term storage, always use dried herbs. Powder the herbs, and if making an actual powder, you might even add a little bit of essential oil. Write your incantation beforehand and memorize it so that you can chant it continuously as you powder the herbs, adding a couple drops of essential oil. Finally, mix in a little unscented talcum powder or cornstarch. Use small amounts only so that you can get a final powder that's easy to sprinkle. You mix the talc with the powdered herbs and essential oil thoroughly. Mix that talc or cornstarch in as the very last step and store your powders in a glass jar. If you wanted to follow planetary numbers for the ingredients for a powder, I exclude the cornstarch as an ingredient because that's a carrier. So if I'm using, if I was doing, a powder for Venus, I might use 7 different ingredients. I might use 6 herbs and 1 essential oil. And then the cornstarch I don't consider an ingredient. But you don't need to use a certain number of ingredients unless that's something that you're really working with. When it comes to incense, it can be as simple as grinding an herb and burning it. Personally, I don't like the smell of burning herbs on charcoal usually. It just smells unpleasant to me. I usually, if I'm going to make incense, I would do it differently. And by the way, if you don't want to burn smoke in your house, you can also place a little piece of aluminum foil on top of your coal, your charcoal. For the waters, witches' brews are very common. We do a lot of potions in the craft, and there's 3 types: water, infusion, and decoction. An infusion uses the leaf material from herbs, essentially making a tea. A decoction is usually barks and roots where you have to boil those, and then you strain them and cool those down. Whereas a water or a hydrosol is a fragranced water. Instead of water, you can use some Everclear and drop some essential oils into it, and that's basically making a cologne. Or you can purchase them if you don't want to distill your own. You can buy rose water, lavender water. Those are called hydrosols. And those are great to use for water magic. You could also just use some distilled water with a few drops of essential oil. Just make sure you shake it before you use it if you don't have a hydrosol or if you don't have perfumer's alcohol or Everclear. The issue that we encounter with spell enhancements is that people often tend to put the cart before the horse, forgetting the enhancement isn't the replacement for the emotional and mental work of the spell. They're enhancements, not the spells themselves. What matters is your intention, visualization, and desire. And then the enhancements will simply enhance that. They're fun, and they are a great way to get your mind excited about what you're doing. Spell enhancements are indeed important, and they have been used for eons, but people become superstitious thinking that the powder itself brings them something. That's not what happens. You need to do the mental and emotional work, and then the enhancement helps to open things up more for you. Just going to an occult store and buying some money powder or money incense and then wondering why nothing ever happens is not the way to go. It's just herbs. It's not going to do anything for you. You need to have something to enhance. Buying a car stereo without having a car doesn't make any sense, does it? You wouldn't buy a bicycle tire if you didn't have a bicycle. So you want to enhance the spell, but don't think that the enhancement necessarily is the spell. Regarding the planets in more than one house, if it's an earth house, make a powder or something other earthy. For a water house, use a wash or an infusion or a potion. For a fire house, use a candle spell or a fire bowl. For now, use the enhancement that fits in the house that rules your spell that you've determined. I know this was a long class. There's plenty to keep you going, so get busy on getting some ideas together for the next waxing moon about what you're going to do and how you're going to do it. And this waning moon period is a wonderful time to revisit the first lesson and get some waning moon magic done. All right, thank you so much for joining me. Until next time, blessed be.